めずともそこにある。
This is Lorelle. She brings an organ into combat, sings, and is somehow classified as a tank DPS. Interesting concept. She functions similar to Fu Xuan, where she reduces damage taken and redirects damage to herself, and she adds additional damage to other characters' basic attacks, similar to Robin. Her max stats are 187% VIT, 136% attack, 113% MST, 30% basic damage reduction, and 5% crit rate. Now let us take a look at her kit. Her active skill is called Prelude, and this allows her to switch between the offensive song and the defensive song. In other words, she has an offensive mode that increases damage and a defensive mode that protects your team. In the defensive song, she has a taunt, gains damage reduction up to 20%, and she has an ability called Polyphony. This deals corrosion damage to the enemy unit whenever your allied units perform a basic attack. As we can see here, this furball is attacking the enemy and deals 6k blue damage. Then the Polyphony deals 11k purple damage based on Lorelle's stats. Her skill also diverts 30% of all damage to herself, and this will add 2 corrosion accumulation to the terminal. Corrosion accumulation is a special feature of the corrosion element units. Once the team accumulates 100 corrosion points, the terminal deals a blast damaging all enemies based on their max HP, and it also increases the attack of all of your units. So that was the defensive song, and now let's see the offensive version. In this mode, Polyphony deals significantly more damage, and while Lorelle is alive, all units increase their basic attack damage by 20%. In defensive, this furball deals 6k blue damage plus 11k purple damage. In offensive, the furball deals 8k blue damage plus 15k purple damage. And if we time how long it takes for us to kill these two mobs, defensive takes 1 minute and 20 seconds to clear, and offensive takes 1 minute. And there is another reason for this difference. Lorelle has an alto skill that she casts every 20 seconds, and this skill changes depending on her current song. The base skill deals massive corrosion damage over time and breaks 1 block gauge, and then it has a finishing move depending on your mode. The offensive finishing move attacks enemies in the front, and the defensive finishing move attacks enemies in a large AoE. Now the damage is around the same, but there is a key difference here. Her offensive move breaks a lot of block gauges, and that is very important because a lot of annoying enemies will have block gauges that reduce all incoming damage to basically 0 until you break it. So her offensive alto skill is extremely valuable. Moving on to her ultimate. This ultimate deals massive damage to random enemies, enhances the current song's effect, and then activates the Dreamcatcher ability. Firstly, the massive damage I believe is more of a damage over time, like her alto skill. In this screen, I believe the damage is the purple pillar of lights that are activated once every couple seconds, dealing 2 to 4k damage to each enemy. And for the enhanced song effects, in defensive, she gains a shield equal to her max HP, and now 65% of all damage taken by allies is diverted to Lorelle, and corrosion accumulation is doubled, so in defensive her defensive abilities are further enhanced. In offensive, fortunately, it is super simple. Polyphony deals increased 18% damage. Now Dreamcatcher, the last ability, is an interesting ability. It grants Lorelle immunity to most control effects. Damage dealt by allies is recorded in Dreamland, and at the end of the song, all enemy units share 30% of the damage recorded in Dreamland as true damage. Or if you wail at max dupes, it is 50% damage. Now that sounds nuclear, but first, how much damage does her ultimate do if her allies do nothing besides basic attacks? Well, fortunately this game actually tells me how much ultimates do. In offensive mode, she dealt 700k. In defensive, she dealt 650k. Now the defensive had extra buffs, so it should be more like 550k, but it doesn't really matter. This level of damage sounds insane, but for an ultimate it is not nuclear. Let us take a look at this furball. $2 million damage, damn. Now what would happen if we spammed all the ultimates during Lorelle's ultimate? Well, let me try that. So the final blast deals 20k to all enemies on the screen. There are approximately 40 enemies, so we dealt somewhere around 800k from this blast alone. Unfortunately, they don't actually tell me the total damage, but that's fine. Now in comparison, when I only did basic attacks, this blast dealt 10k to all the enemies on the screen. Now the furball and the scooter guy's ultimate dealt 3.5 million by itself, so I was expecting a higher increase, to be honest. But maybe I missed something, I don't know. Either way, your damage window will be during her ultimate. Moving on to light cones and relics. Just kidding, there are no relics. Moving on to how you actually use her. She should be used as a tank support sub DPS, so I'd highly recommend having her stay in her defensive mode 90% of the time. The enemies in this game hit you very hard unless you are overpowered, and the boss will sometimes one-shot my DPS if I don't have her in defensive mode. You can also turn offensive mode on if your party is at max HP, or you have another defensive ability activated, such as this character's damage reduction, or you need to break an enemy's block gauge with her auto offensive skill. When it comes to actually using her, her other skill is automatically used, so you won't actively do anything with this character outside of repositioning her on the field or using her ultimate. And once again, you should prioritize all the DPS during her ultimate. So she is very easy to use, nothing complicated. For teammates, she's the preservation unit, so anybody is fine. And that includes other units that may have taunt. Like she has taunt herself, and it may sound bad to have another unit with taunt, but there's so much on the screen that I think it's perfectly fine, okay? She is also a corrosion unit, so you might want other corrosion units to speed up the corrosion accumulation of your terminal to do more damage. But the other corrosion units are 4-star DPS, which are fine, but I usually prefer sending in the 5-star children into combat, as we should all support a diverse military. So overall, she is a great preservation unit that has a high damage reduction, takes damage for your team, can break block gauges, adds damage to ally units' basic attacks, and deals burst damage based on the percentage of damage dealt during the ultimate window. So she is extremely powerful. But is she a must pull? I'd say yes, she is a must pull because supports are extremely valuable in this game compared to DPSs. And there we go. Peace.